Yeah, good to see you. So, yeah, you most of you might not be aware, but there's a retreat going on at the moment. Sayadaw U Tejaniya is leading in Burma for a group of Vietnamese students, and you can listen into part of the recordings. Probably not that easy to find, but uh, yeah. So he was. I quite like to pick up on themes that he's talking about, and it was very clear how the first thing he said when he introduced the practice was about right view, quite a lot about right view. But in it, he was also talking a little bit about right thinking, which is, well, I pick up on both those things this morning. Um, so right thinking is where we use thinking to aid the practice. Often we're thinking, I think it's unconsciously of thoughts and thinking as something to be a bit concerned about, something we'd rather have fewer of. So it's really helpful to recognize the attitude that thinks of thoughts as a bit of a problem. Um, and that practice is going well when there are fewer thoughts, those kind of attitudes. So we want to distinguish between uh, wrong thinking and right thinking. The kind of examples of wrong thinking are sort of when we're caught in thoughts and lost in thoughts, and particularly klesha, so defiled mind consciousness, those kind of thoughts that are mixed up with unskillful mental states. Or what Sayadaw calls nonsense thoughts. So the mind is, we're just allowing the mind to chunter on, but not particularly aware of it. Um, so sometimes, yeah, he'll say with those kinds of nonsense thoughts, necessary or not. And sometimes that's just enough to get the mind to think, oh, I'm just thinking a load of rubbish here. This is really not necessary. So the mind will drop it. But you kind of have to remind yourself or ask the question before in a way you've cottoned on to the fact that I'm just letting the mind get away with all sorts of things here. Um, yeah, right thinking, the kind of right thinking I want to talk about this morning is really to do with the practice, thinking about how to help practice, how you're getting on. So in a way of noticing what's happening as we practice awareness. Um, so just to highlight a couple of areas where we can use thinking skillfully in the practice. So one is right view. This is probably, well, it's probably the main one really. So establishing right view even before we establish awareness. I can find myself a bit resistant to doing this, and you might be the same because there's a need for ease and relaxation for those components of awareness before I do anything else. So I think that's fair enough if you want to just sort of let yourself sort of settle in. But you can bring in right view quite quickly, or even before you meditate, just sitting, reflecting a little bit. So you want this perspective of right view that's in line with the Dharma. Uh, because our usual perspective is often not. It's in line with the poisons, it's in line with what we want and don't want in ourselves, in our lives, in any given situation. But it is very difficult to practice well without right view. Um, we're not able to see objectively. That's what right view really, really helps with, to just see more objectively, see our experience for what it is. These temporary arisings, things that come and go. But with wrong view, we take them to be all about me, to do with my likes and dislikes, what I want, what I don't want. But practicing with right view means that we get to see a process happening. So we're less likely to get caught in content, in the individual sort of arisings, the different sounds, the different sights, the different thoughts that arise. And when we get caught in the content, that's more likely to trigger how we feel about what's arisen, whether we like it or don't like it, whether we want it to stay or want it to go. So all those kinds of things get caught just from a simple, in a way, paying attention to a flower, what a flower looks like on a bush, rather than just noticing that seeing is happening. Smelling is happening, just being more in tune with the senses as they arise. So use thinking to establish or re-establish and remind yourself of right view. Maybe go through a few examples in your experience just to refresh this perspective. Meditation is about what Sayadaw calls mind work rather than object work. We're not so interested in what's happening. We're interested in how we're relating to what's happening, how the mind is with what's happening. And we're interested in processes of body and mind, rather than sort of zooming into the content, zooming into the sort of end of that perceptual process of what's happening. So things like if there's pain in the body, just reminding the mind that this is a natural process. It's dependent upon causes and conditions. You may know what those conditions are, and you might not. But having the perspective that it's a natural process, nobody there. It's nature happening, this cause and effect process. And it might sound a bit abstract. It might feel a bit abstract when you say it to yourself, but just reminding yourself, this is nature happening. Same with some of the other senses. So seeing and hearing. Hearing happens naturally if the conditions support it. If there's something that's being heard, the object, if there's a working sense organ, the ear, and if there's that sense consciousness, hearing, sense consciousness, they come together, hearing happens. Again, not personal. So when we think about right view, we reinforce the perspective, that Dharma perspective, of dependent arising, that things arise in dependence upon conditions. So as much as possible, we want that to be the way that we're viewing experience. So remind yourself of it. Don't push it. Notice if there's how the mind is with that idea, if it reacts to that idea. Yeah, just notice the process that goes on around bringing in right view. Then I'll just touch on the second thing because we're pretty much out of time. And that's, I mentioned this before, of course. There's very few new things in this practice, really, but thinking about our motivation for practice. Why do you practice? Why do you practice awareness? Yeah, and you may have a response that comes to mind. I want to lessen suffering for myself and for others. That's one that comes to mind for me quite a bit. I want to suffer a lessen than the suffering that I impact on others as well as impact on myself. But just two things more generally to drop in here. As motivation for practice, and this again comes from U Tejaniya. He says, with this practice of awareness, we're cultivating positive mental states, positive qualities of mind. That's what we're doing with meditation generally, cultivating. So just absolutely in line with what Bhante says, cultivating positive qualities of heart and mind. And the second thing he says, in this kind of reflective awareness practice, we're meditating in order to learn from our experiences. The experiences themselves, the objects, are not so important, as we've just been hearing with Right View. We want to learn from what's happening. So this is where we might drop in questions in the practice. What's happening right now? What is the mind knowing? Why is this happening? Maybe there's a sense of some kind of klesha increasing, perhaps frustration is increasing, or aversion is increasing. Why is that? So you bring in curiosity to, and that's what you need to do to investigate, for the mind to investigate what's happening. And this interest, this sense of what am I learning, or I think it really helps us get away from this sort of end gaming in practice, where we practice in order to get a particular result. So curiosity, or to make something happen, or to make something go away. So yeah, what am I learning in this moment, rather than what's my what's my sort of agenda in this, and where am I trying to get, or trying to go. So I'll leave it there. Yeah, just a couple of things to reflect on, and ways to use thoughts in a really helpful way.